Now picture an organization that over an almost 2 decades long stretch had Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers as their 2 primary starting quarterbacks, and they have exactly 0 Lombardi trophies to show for it. That's kind of sad, and you'd argue almost pathetic, because we talk about the importance of the quarterback position, how important it is, and if you don't have that right, you really don't have much of a chance. But if you have it right, you have a chance. It is an important reminder, though, that just because you get the quarterback right doesn't automatically solve for everything. It doesn't. As you think about Drew Brees was there for the first 5 years of his career in San Diego before he went off to New Orleans before that 2006 season and became the all-time great, the first ballot Hall of Famer that he ended up being. But Phillip Rivers was there, a starter from 2006 to 2019. Like I said, almost 2 decades between those 2 guys starting. You could argue one organization that got 2 different quarterback selections absolutely correct, nailed it. No championships to show for it. So you feel like you're starting the cycle again. And for Chargers fans, whether the team in San Diego or Los Angeles, doesn't really matter. Like, you might not feel lucky. You feel like you're a snake-bitten franchise, because in some ways you are. And especially having a quarterback like a Drew Brees and following up with a decade plus, almost a decade and a half of Phillip Rivers, and not having a championship to show for it, you certainly got to feel snake-bitten. I would agree. But you're looking forward into the 2020 season, and you're saying, okay, Phillip Rivers is moving on to Indy. In comes the kid from Oregon, Justin Herbert. Oh boy. Can we go 3 in a row here at the quarterback position? And that was what you were all concerned about if you're a Chargers fan this year, I would have to think. You didn't care about anything else, nor should you have. Because you had went with Phillip for almost a decade and a half as the guy at the top. So you wanted to know if you have that next guy at the top. And boy, I think you got your answer this year. I wasn't sure when you were going to get it, though. Because, of course, initially Anthony Lynn wanted to start Tyrod Taylor for whatever dumb dick reason. And yes, the team won their opening game against the Bengals, who were starting the rookie Joe Burrow in that one. But it was ugly. The offense stunk. And, of course, Anthony Lynn was stubbornly digging in his heels. And you were thinking, hey, it might be a while before Herbert actually sees the field, so it's going to feel like a real waste and a real lost season. But then you had the unfortunate break for Tyrod Taylor, that medical mishap right before the Kansas City game, which ended up being potentially a very fortuitous mishap for the Chargers organization, because that was Justin Herbert's time to make his first start of the season against the defending champions, and he showed out well. They lost to him in overtime, but he showed out really well, and he never looked back. And you look at this Chargers team, and there's a ton of reason to be excited, even with some of the frustration, some of the snake-bitten elements that you certainly saw in 2020, to sit there and say, man, I'm looking forward to the future with this team. As you look at them, talk about the snake-bitten element, 7 losses by 8 points or less. So 7 games that they lost by 1 score. And a lot of that, I think, you can equate to coaching. And while they won their last 4 games of the season, they went 500 in the division. Then you've got the 45-0 loss, wasn't it, against the Patriots, where the special teams were just god-awful? Like, that's a reflection of coaching. That's on Anthony Lynn and his staff. And beyond all else, the mere fact that Anthony Lynn, during the offseason, looked at Tyrod Taylor and Justin Herbert in any way, shape, or form and said that Tyrod Taylor was the better option is when his future was sealed. That's the moment that he was fired. He should have been fired right then and there when it was clearly obvious just how bad his judgment was and just how flat out wrong he was. Hopefully, maybe Anthony Lynn will learn from this and get a second opportunity in the future, but it was really egregious and bad, even though you might say, well, it's a bit of an overreaction because it wasn't that much. It's just more of a representation of what it means and what it shows. Like, he was that out of touch. He sees this Justin Herbert and thought Tyrod Taylor was better. But now that you've sent him packing, what do you got when you're talking about the Chargers? You're talking about a team that finished 7th in the league in total yards gained per game. Justin Herbert had a monster season, ended up being Offensive Rookie of the Year. Over 4,300 yards passing, 31 touchdowns, and only 10 interceptions. And I know you're going to have a lot of folks that point to Justin Jefferson's tremendous season at wide receiver for the Vikings and saying he should have been the Offensive Rookie of the Year. I don't have a ton of passion one way or another, but you look at Justin Herbert's rookie season at the quarterback position, wide receiver is one thing, quarterback is a whole different damn level. And look at what the fuck Herbert did. I'm sorry, that's pretty offensive rookie of the year worthy to me. And this was without, a lot of reason for thinking it was going to be like this. Like, that's what's crazy about it. Defensively, they were top 10 in the league in total yards allowed per game. So think about that. You've got a team that's top 10 in the league in yards gained, top 10 in the league in fewest yards allowed. And that's even overcoming some injuries, like not having Derwin James at all for the entire season, having Joey Bosa out for a few games, losing Chris Harris for almost half the seasons. And they didn't make the playoffs. With a quarterback throwing for over 4,300 yards and 31 touchdowns. That's coaching. And that's why Anthony Lynn got fired. So the Chargers' number one goal of the program this offseason was to go find that head coach that could be better. And they went and got Brandon Staley from the crosstown Los Angeles Rams, their defensive coordinator. And this was an interesting choice to me. I talked about it in the video discussing the hire, because you open up a situation where Staley's the defensive guy, but you could potentially have a constant revolving door at the offensive coordinator position with a Justin Herbert, because if he's successful, that coordinator, quarterback coach, those guys are going to be hot commodities as a guy like Herbert enjoys success. So you're always constantly looking at having to retool or reshape or remold the system around your quarterback every couple of years. Not the most advantageous position to be in. Whereas maybe you go with an offensive-minded guy, you say, okay, even if the offensive coordinator gets a new job, like the head coach stays, the philosophy overall doesn't change, it stays the same. But there is something perhaps to say about, you want this young guy who had great success coordinating the Rams defense in 2020. He's been a guy on the quick ascendancy for sure, and you can figure out the rest later. And ultimately, you just want the right guy to build the right infrastructure there. So we'll see how that works out. But offseason, at least you know that you've got your head coach now, and we'll see what happens there. But more importantly, you've got your quarterback. You have zero questions there. So you know now that if you do things right in this offseason and you build around that quarterback, you're going to be a playoff team next year. And if you're not, something went tragically wrong. In terms of what this team should do in the offseason, you got some cap space there. Not a ton, but a lot of teams don't have a ton of cap space. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this free agent market plays out. But you got guys like Melvin Ingram, Henry Hunter, our free agents. Mike Pouncey just announced his retirement along with his brother Marquise. Denzel Perryman, Forrest Lamp, Dan Feeney. So these are several guys that you've got that are going to be free agents. You certainly can't expect that they would be able to keep all of them, but probably keep a couple of them. Maybe a guy like Melvin Ingram is allowed to walk and go somewhere else, so you bring him back on a one-year deal. But either way, like the thing that's crazy about this Chargers team is they're a lot closer than we think or want to believe, but they got to get it right if they want to get to where they can get to. And how do they do that in this offseason? Between free agency, trade market, and especially the draft, they've got to beef up that offensive line in front of Herbert. That's the tackles. Specifically, I want to see them get a long-term blindside protector for him. But if it means that where they're drafting at pick 13 in round 1, somebody like the Vera Tucker kid from USC, who you might project more as a guard, you think that he's the best offensive lineman on the board, then you know what? You just fucking take him. The premise and the principle is protect Herbert is goal, job number 1. And I would expect this team to invest multiple picks potentially on that offensive line, and certainly would be looking to target that position potentially in round number 1. I certainly think somewhere in day 2, they need to get another running back that could be a complement to Austin Eckler, potentially a replacement for Austin Eckler. You only got 10 games out of him this year. Again, this is about trying to beef up your offense and protect your young quarterback. And I don't know that their current running game really is set up that well to do it. In terms of their defense, they could certainly use some more depth and talent in the secondary. I think they use the rotational guy out on the edges, especially if they let a Melvin Ingram leave. That would just increase the need there. But you look at this Chargers team, they've got their quarterback. So they go into this offseason, I think, feeling good about the fact that maybe with better leadership and better coaching, that even just a few of those games that they lost by 8 points or less where they felt so snake-bitten, they'll win a few of those. And if they improve this roster at all, they're a playoff team next year. And perhaps, as crazy as it sounds, a team that could potentially bang with and threaten the Chiefs in the AFC West. Yeah, I said it.